This comes out of section 8.3, logarithmic functions. We're asked to sketch y equals negative ln x and y equals ln of negative x. Really just a review of your transformations, reflections a little bit. If you start off with y equals ln x without transforming it, it looks something roughly like that. So if I do a reflection about the x-axis, it's going to turn this graph upside down, and I have a graph that looks like this. If I do the other reflection about the y-axis, my graph looks something like this. Now I suppose labeling a point or two wouldn't hurt. You have an asymptote here in all cases, an asymptote at x equals 0, x equals 0, x equals 0. These first two graphs go through the point 1, 0. This last graph goes to the point negative 1, 0. So useful to be able to recall those transformations without thinking about them too hard. Now, where that leads to in some cases is a question like this next one. We're asked to find the domain of this thing, y equals ln of 9 minus x squared. Well, if you know your properties of logs, you know that the only numbers that you can't have inside there are 0 or less. So as long as 9 minus x squared is greater than 0, you'll be able to log whatever that number is. So if I solve that, I can solve it as, this factors as the difference of squares. And so I can look at the numbers negative 3 and 3. That's where this thing equals 0. So let's see what happens to the left, in between, and to the right of those. If I pick a number like negative 50, I can have a positive times a negative, and this thing will not be greater than 0. So those numbers are no good. If I pick a number like 0, I can have 3 times 3 is positive, and numbers in between there will always give me positive answers. Number to the right of 3, like 10, negative times a positive is a negative. So the domain of this thing is actually quite limited in that x needs to be between negative 3 and positive 3. That is the limit on my domain. That leads to the next question, which is, I guess, more of a calculus question, saying what's the limit as x approaches 3 from the left of the natural log of 9 minus x squared. Now, if they were to ask me the two-sided limit here, I'd have no choice but to say it does not exist, because you can't approach 3 from the other side. It's not in the domain. You'd be logging a negative number. So you couldn't ask what's the limit as x approaches 3 from the right, or what's the two-sided limit as x approaches 3. But from the left, you can. You do have graph there. You picture putting in a number like 2.9999999. When you square it, it's going to give you a number just less than 9. 8.99999. You end up logging an infinitely small number, which when you do natural log of an infinitely small number, you can make this thing go to negative infinity. So whatever exactly you see going on in this graph, it does appear as though at positive 3 you have vertical asymptote, and on one side of it you're approaching negative infinity as you approach it from the left.